Thank you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. My guest for this episode is Ian McShane. So, Ian, if you could introduce yourself, give a little bit of background.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name's Ian McShane. I'm not American. I'm English. I've been in cybersecurity for about 20 years, mostly on the vendor side for such names as Arctic Wolf, Symantec, CrowdStrike, Endgame, and probably my most well-known job prior to this was working as the lead analyst at Gartner, where I covered endpoint protection and EDR and all the kind of security operations topics there.
All right. Well, so not, hopefully people know, but not everyone knows that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I know that I've at least in my circles, I've seen on LinkedIn and on Twitter a fairly steady stream of people, making comments and talking about the importance of mental health, destigmatizing it, which I think is a huge thing. Really, is just having the conversation and making it acceptable to just have that conversation and just admit that there's a problem and not like you have to kind of like muscle through. But I wanted to have you on really to kind of talk about your perspective on some of these issues. So you said you've been working in cybersecurity for 20 years. I've been working in and writing about cybersecurity for about the same amount of time. Burnout, burnout is an issue for any industry, anyone really, but I do feel like cybersecurity is particularly prone to burnout, especially the people who are in the trenches in a SOC. It's just with sort of being under constant siege from attacks. There just isn't really downtime. I mean, it is a 24/7 operation. You don't personally have to be on 24/7, but the operation has to be 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and sometimes that ends up being that one person or two people in IT or security do have to be on 24/7 because stuff's down and stuff needs fixing and the business needs it to carry on. Like you say, it's not new. I've aged myself obviously by saying I've been around for like 20 years, but even 20 years ago when I was what we would call frontline as a sysadmin, we would have days of 24-hour shifts. I slept on more data center floors than I care to remember, right? Surrounded by air conditioning and servers, taking a 20 to 25 minute cat nap while the latest firmware update was happening to the SAN to see if that would bring it back online. So it's something that's been around for a really long time. I think for all of the misery that social media brings, I think one of the benefits has been that it really has given the opportunity to raise a spotlight to health and well-being, and especially in our industry too.
Well, yeah, one of the things, and I want to say this is somewhat uniquely American, but I could be wrong. But is this idea of that it's an achievement or a badge of honor for you to kind of push through, and that starts young. I mean, because it's like in elementary school, there's they pass out awards for at the end of the year for people who had perfect attendance and stuff, and it's like, okay, but to achieve perfect attendance, what that means is you woke up and you had like a fever and a runny nose, but you went to school anyway because you wanted to have perfect attendance. And people do that for work too. People are like, well, I woke up feeling like shit. But I must, I took some Advil and here I am. I was like, well, don't do me any favors. Go home.
Absolutely. I mean, even my kids' school. So my kids, high school and lower age for the American audience. But every month they report on the classes that had the best attendance, and there's awards for 100% attendance throughout the year. It's dangerous precedence to set. You're quite right.
All right. I mean, and my daughter is a dancer, and she's been dancing since she was like 2, and not where she's at now so much, but the studio she was at when she was like 8, 9, 10. They did that, where they were like, at the end of the year there'd be like a perfect attendance award, and there were girls who literally came like too sick to dance, but just to like be in the room and take notes or whatever. And it's like, okay, but then the next week, 5 kids are out because your kid wanted perfect attendance. Now everyone's sick.
Yeah, it's that, and you're right. It's translated into business, not just in the US, but certainly in the UK as well. That it's a badge of honor for powering through and not needing to. I don't need to take the rest. It's all right. I'm hard as nails. Look at me. I can come to work and still get the job done. And I think that's something, hopefully, touch wood, that COVID is going to put the end to, because I don't want people coming to work if they think they've even got the inkling of having COVID. Right? I'm just getting over COVID now, and it sucks. I tell you, it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I've not had it, but my son's had it. A couple of my sons have had it. But you touched on what I was getting ready to talk about, which is hopefully, what we've gone through the past couple of years, where everyone started working from home. Now, I've been working from home for the most part for all 20 years of my, that's pretty much all I've ever done. I only very reluctantly go into the office when it's like a requirement.
I'm the same. I'm like a typical IT nerd. I hate most people, and I would rather, sit on my own in a dark room and get stuff done.
Well, but part of my philosophy was always, and I feel like the world is finally catching up to this, was always, look, if I wake up and I have a headache or a fever or my throat hurts, that doesn't incapacitate me. I can still work, but I don't want to come to the office. Like I don't want to come in and expose everyone else to my germs, or never mind that when you're sick, then you're just more irritable and you want to be around people even less. But I'm like, but it doesn't mean I can't work as long as you let me work from here.
Yeah, but I think there's a line there that the onus is on us as the remote employees that isn't crossed, is that we're not just working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, whatever the weather, right? If you're sick, you're sick. I think that's something that is probably new to a lot of folks that are starting to work from home. Certainly over COVID, I heard a lot of feedback like this, is that they felt like because they weren't going into the office, they had to demonstrate value even more so for being away. And that meant working when they were sick or working more hours than you would do it in the office. Like anecdotally from friends and former colleagues, I would hear throughout COVID of big organizations that should know better, really encouraging people to take early morning meetings, because now you don't have to commute. So what are you doing in the morning? Or where are you going to go on vacation during a pandemic? Why do you need some time off,
Right. Well, and I've been guilty of that. I've been guilty of that myself, and guilty of using that really as a bargaining chip. Because so when I was at EDS around 2004, 2005, I was working from home, but they got like I want to say it was a new CFO who came in and looked at all of their leasing agreements and was like, well, we're paying for all of this office space, people, so they rescinded all of the like remote work arrangements and said, everyone needs to come to the office. We're like, we have to pay the rent whether you show up or not. So we want you to show up. Now, I was also I was writing on the side, so I had a day job, but I was writing for about.com. I was working on books. I was doing a bunch of stuff. A bunch of stuff that paid me in addition to my day job. And so when my manager says, okay, well, you have to come into the office now. And I was like, I don't like that. That's a bad idea. And he was like, well, you have to, it's a requirement. And I was like, well, look, right now I can wake up, I can sit down at the desk in my pajamas at 6 a.m. I'm working. If you want me to come in, now I've got to wake up like earlier. I've got to shower, get dressed. I got to get in the car. There's an hour and a half commute depending on traffic. That's all just wasted time. And then there's the hour and a half commute home, et cetera, et cetera. And from my perspective, I was trying to make the case that it was all wasted time, but really I was saying, no, you're wasting my time. Those are billable hours for me.
Yeah.
But in the end, they were like, well, no, you have to come in. And I said, okay, fine. But know this, I will show up on time. I will leave on time. At 5:01, if you say, Tony, I'm going to stop you right there. Because I'm like, no, you already stole like 4 hours of my day. You don't get any more.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's great.
That was my argument. But the thing is, as you're framing it now, and it's true, that should always be the case, really. Like it should, like regardless of whether I'm working from home or not, it's like, well, no, I gave you your time. I'm done now.
Yeah, those boundaries are really important to set and to try and stick to. That's the harder part, is trying to stick to that yourself. And certainly I have trouble trying to stick to, or trying to enforce work-life balance / boundaries all the time. I do wonder as well, it just popped in my mind as you were saying that, like how much of that, what's the right way to put it? How much of that is like, being male and being white and having that privilege to be able to stand up to your boss and saying, do you know what, it's 5:01, get out of here, I'm done.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that, in a similar vein, one of the things that was brought to my attention recently, and I was like, oh shit, that's true, is the entire concept of, oh, well, COVID hit and now we all just work from home, is a very privileged thing. Like that's like people who work in retail, work in healthcare, work, like there's lots of jobs, work in the restaurant industry, like they didn't get to just sit home. Yep. And there's like a inverse relationship between sort of the pay and benefits that go with the jobs that get to stay home and the pay and benefits that go with the jobs where, no, you've got to show up. So it's very, very privileged. My whole career has been very, very privileged in my ability to just say, you know what, I'm going to work right here. I'm good.
Yep, 100%. And I'm in the same boat. I spent most of my working career working remotely for American companies. So a commute for me is, San Jose or Mountain View or Sunnyvale. It's somewhere in, California. So yeah, you're totally right. There's a real benefit and boon to being able to have that. But I think, like, from a personal standpoint, with that kind of power comes responsibility to yourself as well. And I think that's one of the things, especially for folks that are getting used to or new to remote working, again, is defining and sticking to those boundaries. Because, like you say, it's a benefit, and more, especially in IT and cybersecurity, it's becoming a benefit that people are expecting as part of their remuneration, right? It's like, I want to get paid a lot of money. I want to do some really cool stuff. Oh, and guess what? I want to do it wherever I want, not wherever I can, wherever I want. So it becoming a benefit is really interesting, because now we've got to start to balance that with, what does that mean at home? Because I realize I'm privileged. Does that mean I need to stay online, in air quotes, for an extra 2 or 3 hours so that my manager doesn't rescind this now that we're going back to the office?
Right. Well, and that I'm surprised we're still in this boat, sort of, because, almost 20 years ago, I was having these conversations. So it's not really new to me, but I had basically, the point I'm going to get to is that the management culture needs to change. It's that, the managers are the ones who are like, oh, well, if you're not sitting at this desk in this cube, 8 to 5, how do I know you're working? Mm-hmm. And I had that conversation in like 2003. And he was like, well, if you're not here, how do I know what you do? I'm like, it's simple. You say, Tony, I need XYZ by Friday. Either I give it to you by Friday or I don't. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. Like,
yeah. You don't need to measure. You don't need to measure.
For all you know, I cranked that out over lunch on Monday, and I went golfing on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then dropped it in your inbox on Friday. That's none of your damn business. Like, you're measuring the wrong thing. You're not paying me for my time. You're paying me for what I deliver, for what I provide to the company. So if I can do that in an hour and a half, then you don't get 40 hours.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it's the knee-jerk reaction that I think a lot of organizations, again, that are new to remote working went to, was like this hyper supervisory mode, where they're like, right, everyone needs to be on Zoom on a camera so I can see you sat in front of your laptop. We're going to have monitoring stuff, making sure that your keys are being pressed and your mouse is being moved and that your machine isn't going to sleep. And then it was kind of fun to see all the people working around it, like getting, have you ever seen that episode of The Simpsons where Homer starts working from home and he has the nodding thing that starts tapping the A? And so people were getting those to move the mouse, right? So the tracking software would think that there's people actually interacting with the device. It's sad times. I mean, dystopian sad times, but hilarious at the same time.
But, and the pushback I got, though, and that I've heard many times over the years is, they will say, oh, well, if we let everyone do that, there's going to be someone who abuses that. There's going to be someone who doesn't get their stuff done by Friday. I'm like, then fucking deal with them.
Yeah, and what about
Is that my problem?
Sucks in the office as well? The people that are going around and taking 2-hour, 3-hour lunches in the office. I used to see that when I worked in offices.
Right. So I was like, that this whole thing is there's a very simple solution, which is you set expectations. If they're met, yay. If they're not met, you address it. You don't need to have a blanket draconian policy that says we're going to assume you all suck, so we're going to control everything.
Exactly. One of the first things I used to say to direct reports when they came on board is like, you've obviously passed your interviews. You've demonstrated that you can hopefully do the job. You've demonstrated your character. So why wouldn't I want to trust you on day one? Like, I'm going to trust you to get your job done until you give me a reason otherwise. There's no need for me to, like you say, just keep harassing you every day. Are you working? Are you at your desk? Why I can't see you at your cube? I haven't seen you scratch your ass for 3 hours. What are you doing?
Right. Well, and along those same lines, the conversation that I had, back in 2003, one of the other pushbacks was, one of the responses to my argument was, but if you get it done on Monday, then I want you, you should turn it in. I want you to turn it in on Tuesday. And I'm like, no, see, that's the problem. And this is going to sound cocky, but there's a fine line sometimes between cocky and true. I'm like, I'm 2 to 3 times better and faster than my peers.
You don't get paid that
upside,
much more.
Right? You're not going to pay me 2 to 3 times more. There's no upside for me in delivering this thing that you asked for on Friday on Tuesday, because all that means is you're going to give me another one that you're going to want on Wednesday, and then another one you're going to want on Friday, because I can. And that's not how this works. So I'm like, I'm not giving you 3 times more just because I can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And by all means, if you want to pay me 3 times more, that's a conversation we can have. But I'm not gonna just do it. And and I came back to my same argument, which is just no. The way you lead a team and the way you run a company is by setting expectations and having deliverables. And as long as people are doing those things, at least to the level of expectation. Now, hopefully, people should strive to exceed the level of expectation to some extent. Like in my case, I could do the report on Monday. I could go golfing on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then like Thursday afternoon, I could submit the report and be like, cool, I'm ahead of schedule. You asked for it on Friday. Here, I'm giving it to you on Thursday.
Let me play devil's advocate for a minute. Like one of my favorite discoveries, I guess, of my working career is that HR doesn't work for the employee; it works for the company, right? And so on a similar line, like, why should I want, and just putting this out there, why should I have to exceed what I'm being asked and paid to do? Not everyone wants to be promoted. Not everyone wants to be a team manager. Some people are happy to come to work and do the job they do and, clock in, tick the box and clock out again, right?
Absolutely. Well, I agree. And I'd say that's like almost like a separate corporate culture conversation to have of why is the expectation that if I want, even if I want to be promoted, if I want to, a raise, why do I have to work above what you're asking me to do to achieve those things? Like if I do what you're asking me to do, that's almost frowned upon. You're like, okay, great. You showed up. You did the thing I asked you to do, pat on the back. But if you actually want to move forward, they always say, work, do the job you want, not the job you have. And it's like, well, no, I'm only being paid for the job I
Exactly. How about they pay me for the job they want me to do?
Right. I mean, different anecdote, but my first job in IT, I had been in the Air Force. I had gone into doing sales stuff with my dad for his money mailer franchise in Illinois, and then I, decided to apply for IT jobs. So I had no official like technical IT background. I didn't go to school for it. My background was I had been using computers since I was 12 and taught myself everything on a Commodore 64. That was my background.
Yep.
But I went in, I did the interview, and I was hired for the job. And the job was I was at McCann Erickson Detroit as an advertising agency, and they had a very small IT department. There were 2 people there, and he hired me to basically be the guy who answers the phone, and basically dispatches the other 2. So the calls would come in, I'd get the email, I'd say, oh, hey, you know what, Joe, I need you to go fix, Lisa's computer on the 3rd floor. But when I don't really know the explanation. I don't know why he chose to do it this way, because again, I had no background, no experience. But on the org chart, he put me over these 2 people. They both quit week 1. They were like, never mind, we're out. And I was like, oh, okay. So then he says, okay, well, now I just need you to do it all. So, the call comes in, and instead of saying, hey, Joe, I need you to fix Lisa's computer, you just need to get up and go fix Lisa's computer. And then you need to come back and find out what the next ticket is. And I was like, all right, cool. And after like 2 weeks of that, I was like, okay, but you're working on hiring their replacements, right? And they were like, well, no, this seems to be working. This is good. And I said, oh, okay. I said, you know what? It's actually kind of working for me too. That's fine. I'm going to need a raise. And, they immediately were like, you've been here 2 weeks. They're like, there's a whole policy in place. We have a process, after 1 year, then we'll look at this and then we'll consider it. And, we'll talk then. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. I'm not doing this for a year and they're like, yeah, but we don't give raises. I said, it's not a raise. Like, what do you mean? I said, you hired me to do this job. Now you're asking me to do this job. And if you ask me to do 3 jobs when you only hired me to do 1 job, now you need to pay me for the other 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, I wasn't asking them to like triple my pay. I was, I think I was being very reasonable about it. I was like, no, you're asking me to do more. I'm going to need more. And so it was a 50% bump from what I originally had. But it was still a significant savings for them. So I'm like, look, I'm meeting you in the middle here. Like I'm asking for a lot personally, but you're still saving a ton. And they gave it to me, and it all worked out. But yeah, it was like the companies do a lot of that too, where like they downsize or they let someone go, and then they just go, let's just see how it goes. Everyone else pick slack, and we'll just let it ride.
Yeah, like I've got a similar story to that, right? But almost the polar opposite, I suppose. So I don't know if that makes it similar. Like my background's, I didn't go to college or school after I left permanent education. My background before my first IT job was running a Mexican restaurant. So I was hired for customer service skills or dealing with difficult drunk customers, maybe. And so I started, in a call center doing frontline support for consumer email. And this is back in the days of dial-up. This is back in the days of POP3 and SMTP and the devil's mail device itself, Outlook Express. And so I spent a lot of time on the phone for 9 hours, 10 hours a day with generally tech-phobic people, even in 2001, that were just trying to get their email. And I worked in frontline support, so I had no access to anything. I was the lowest of the low. Second line looked down on you, third line didn't even give you the time of day, and engineering wouldn't pee on you if you're on fire. So it kind of sucked. But what I discovered was if I could actually make my life easier by, number one, figuring out how things worked, figuring out how I can solve problems without access to other tools, and kind of hacking my way around the system. So instead of just being that phone jockey that like reads through a script and then says, do you know what, someone's going to call you back in 24 hours because fuck only knows what's wrong with this, I would actually, go a step further and start to figure out, is this like a password issue, actually typing this in? Are you, going further to troubleshoot things rather than going down that script? And you know what? It made my job a lot more enjoyable because not only was I solving things, I'm a geek, I like to fix things anyway, but not only was that, I wasn't dealing with as many irate customers because the phone calls would take longer to do. My managers were annoyed at the amount of time I was spending on each individual call, and the number of calls per day was going down. But I was actually, able to prove by them listening into the calls that I'm actually solving problems. And that's how, ultimately I managed to get myself promoted through the kind of call center ranks, because I wanted to make my life easier, because the job they hired me to do was terrible.
Right. Yeah, I don't generally envy the first line customer service, not just in tech, but all of them. I mean, now I actually, I'm on both sides of that coin because I don't envy them. At the same time, I will be irate with them.
Oh man. The thing is, I know the inside baseball. I know they're reading from a script. I know what they're telling me is what they're allowed to tell me. And it still infuriates me. I'm like, I know what you're about to tell me. Can you just progress this to the next one? They're like, well, let's try a few things first. I'm like, I know it's not going to work. Like, right. I'm that smart ass person on the other end of the phone, right?
That's the curse of anyone in tech. Like when you finally get to the point where you're like, okay, I can't solve this. I actually have to call Apple or Microsoft or whatever and figure out what's going on here. But you've got to get through level 1 and 2. You're like, look, I guarantee you, I have already done your level 1 and 2 flowcharts. They're done. Those didn't solve the problem.
But I can empathize with it because they don't know me, right? They get 1 million people a day calling up thinking they know everything. And do you know what? Sometimes, like, I hold my hands up. I've taken something into the Genius bar because it wasn't working. And they've been like, have you done this? Have you tried a different cable? That's what it was, because it wasn't charging. Like, they said, have you tried a different cable? I'm like, yeah, it didn't work. And they said, oh, have you cleared the fluff out? And I'm like, yeah, of course I have. That was the first thing I did. So the guy reached into his pocket, the Genius bar, and pulled out the SIM card removal tool, right, that you used to get with every phone. Yeah. You still do. And like, he pulled out this like dime-sized ball of fluff straight out of the lightning thing and then plugged it in and it charged. And I'm like looking at him going, well, I'm the biggest fucking idiot in the world now, aren't I?
No, I had a similar Genius Bar experience, actually. Where I was like, yeah, just won't charge. I don't know what to tell you. And then they're like, oh, well, let's take all this fluff out of here. I'm like, all right, well.
Well, that makes me feel a bit bad. Good.
Guess that would solve the problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, bringing it back, I guess, a little bit to cybersecurity in particular, one of the things, we've been saying for, I want to say at least 4 or 5 years now, these statistics about the cybersecurity skills gap, and we have far too many cybersecurity needs. There aren't enough people. We need more people, but at the same time, the people we have, we kind of abuse them, and they're all getting burnt out. So, there seems to be like a conflict there where it's like we want more people, but why would anyone want that job unless you get to be like an engineer at like Netflix or Facebook or something? Because I saw the thing going around last week or whatever with like these guys are getting paid $500,000 plus. I'm like, I'm in the wrong field.
Yep, seriously. I looked at that and I was like, well, I jumped on the wrong bandwagon a few years ago, didn't I?
But so what? How would you say organizations can deal with that? Like, what can an organization do? You need cybersecurity analysts. You need people working in the Arctic Wolf. Is a offers SOC services and things. You need people in there, and it is a 24/7 operation. So how do you find the balance of making sure people have the right boundaries and sort of enforcing the boundaries, I think, because I think some people just won't do it on their own. I think sometimes it's up to the management, and some companies have like forced sabbaticals and like, you must take this time off.
One of the interesting things about being with Arctic Wolf in the last year is just really kind of understanding the mindset people have against adopting, air quotes, managed services, right? And when I've been talking to customers and people in general, there's this real stigma about offshoring things. Like, I think if you go back to big companies like IBM or even Symantec, where I was for a while, and other ones, I'm sure do the same thing. They would like acquire products, lay off the expensive human capital in air quotes, and then outsource it to cheaper countries, right? And I think that's given managed services or outsourcing or the outsourcing perspective a bit of a like dirty word. So if you talk to people about outsourcing or taking on managed services, they're like, well, it feels like then I've failed in my job, or it feels like I'm trying to replace my team. What's been interesting is if you flip the conversation around a little bit and use different words and talk about automation, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we've got projects for automation coming out of the wazoo, and then you say, all right, cool, how about you like automate some of the tedious crap that your security analysts are doing. They're like, well, what do you mean? And you describe all the benefits of a managed service without calling it a managed service. And they're like, holy cow, that sounds amazing. When can we get some of that? Right. And so I think, there's this real culture against trying to outsource, because I think people see it as failure. But the reality is, cybersecurity is critical for every organization, right? I had a wicked conversation with a lady called Sue Gordon, who was, and I'm going to get her job title wrong, I'm sure, but she was the Deputy Director for National Security for the US. And one phrase she used really stuck in my mind, because it's such a simple way to explain how important cybersecurity is to everyone. And that is that you are either the target or the transport. You have to pick one. You might be both, but you're definitely one. You're either the target or the transport, and that's everyone, whether that's opportunistically being compromised and then used later, whether that's being targeted for extortion or ransomware. Cybersecurity is critical for everyone, and just some organizations are never going to be able to afford a 24/7 operation. Like if you think about shift work and vacations and illness, you're going to need like 6 or 7 people just to have a very basic 24/7 coverage, right? That's without any of the strategic stuff or the tactical stuff. And especially down market, 6 or 7 people is probably, someone's entire sales force, let alone their entire, their IT team or anything like that. So in a world where everything is moving to automation and to the cloud, I think one way people can do that to try and at least get some breathing space for IT folks that are on 24/7 is, automate some of the boring stuff, get the sock out of the sock and get someone else to deal with that.
Right. Well, one of the things, when I think of managed security services, my former day job was at Alert Logic, and so we were in the market. And when I think of managed security services, I would always look at it like, okay, there are things, if your company makes baseballs, so you have a factory, you're producing baseballs, that's what you do. Great. So all about that, about the materials and that's your thing. You know how to sell that, the market, but you don't know cybersecurity. That's not your thing. So why wouldn't you outsource it? And I think a lot of companies and a lot of people have this sort of like defensiveness about, okay, but this is, it's like, it's my data and it's my systems and I don't want anyone else kind of messing with that. And it's like, okay, but you're not like trying to hire and build your own like medical facility in-house in case you need a doctor. You're outsourcing someone to come in and dump the trash and vacuum the floors. You're outsourcing, like all of these things. You're outsourcing all of these things because that's not your thing. That's not your area of expertise. But this one thing that also is not your area of expertise, you want to hang on to, and it just doesn't make any sense, because not only is it not your thing, but like the people who do the managed security, that's what they live and breathe. So their job is paying attention to the threat landscape and knowing what's coming. And because they're dealing with not just you, but 1,000 other clients around the world, they have a much broader perspective on this is what's going on in the world right now. Whereas if you're only protecting your own company, you have to wait until the attacker gets to your door to know what's going on.
Yeah. You remember when like cloud security or cloud computing, was in its infancy, 10, 15 years ago. And there was this talk about, I don't want to move stuff or infrastructure to the cloud. It's just less secure. And people couldn't grasp that, Google and AWS is going to be way more secure of a data center than you could ever build on your own. It's like, it's an actual fact. Like there's going to be room for error. There's going to be configuration stuff, but it's still going to be way more secure than you could build for yourself. And it took some time for people to get over that adoption, especially if I think about Europe and how, data residency centric everything became over here. But ultimately, I think managed services and managed outcomes is maybe a better way to put it, because it's not just, people coming in to sweep the floor and take the trash out. There's, very specific outcomes. I think it has to take adoption, because it has to be adopted. I think every organization is going to use some level of it at some point in the next, 3 to 5 years, because there's just no way to scale. Like I said, 6 or 7 people to do it 24/7 operation is just not going to work for the most of the world.
Right. Well, and like when I was at EDS, like actually when I kind of went from like the network admin side to the cybersecurity side, was we they had gotten the contract to do security for General Motors, and so he wasn't my manager, but a manager came to me, Stuart Tan came to me, and he was like, "Hey, look, we're making this team to do this thing," and I had just gotten my MCSE, so he wanted someone who understood Windows to come and be on this team, and so that was my transition to cybersecurity. But we built a team. Like we were doing it managed before it was cool. I mean, because I'm talking, 2003, 2004, we were doing managed endpoint security. Basically, it was managed antivirus. But we only had a team of 5 to 10 people, and we were managing all of General Motors, all of American Airlines, all of Marathon Oil, all of their antivirus. So I'm used to that model, and it makes sense to me. I'm like, no, and we had people who was like, there was someone who was, you had an area of expertise and then a secondary area of expertise when it came to Symantec, McAfee, Trend Micro, CA. We had those 4 major platforms. And so like, I was like a Trend Micro, Trend Micro team 1 with a minor in McAfee. And that's just how, and then we delegated based on, which clients had which antivirus, and managed that 24/7 with our team of 10 people for like hundreds of thousands of seats around the world. Because all we were really doing is pushing virus signatures, which whole separate conversation. Like at the time, the process when we started with General Motors, their process was it was 30 days from a signature release to having it deployed, because there was an entire like testing and sandbox pilot program thing they had to do before they could, and that's as like cybersecurity was really kind of exponentially escalating, and we were like, no, you don't understand, these signatures are coming out like daily, like they're sometimes more than daily. You can't wait 30 days. But all that to say, like, you can when you work with a managed provider, they can do the same job with fewer people because they're dedicated to doing that job. What I think, where I think it gets away from, like, if you're trying to deal with the defensiveness of like, well, this is our security, this is our stuff. It's like, okay, well, you should still have a security team. I'm not telling you not to have anybody. I'm telling you, let me be the guy who's monitoring 24/7 and dealing with all the stuff, the false alarms and all of the things that are minor things that we can just address. And then I'll just let you know about the 5 things that matter.
That's the thing, right? Alert fatigue is the buzzword that won't die, right? It's been around for 15 years, or since the SIM was invented, right? And if I just look at the statistics that we have in our SOC at Arctic Wolf, like, we take 318 billion events every single day. That's a lot of noise, right? And even that, once that's passed, enriched, and processed and stuff, it still ends up being around about 300,000 what we call interesting events, right? Those would be the things that people have to go and investigate and figure out, is this real? What do I need to do? And being able to do that kind of thing at scale is really the difference between trying to roll your own and using a managed service, because you're getting the economies of scale just don't work for one organization. Like, you want to take advantage of stuff being seen within the broader sense of the customer base and being able to be protected by discoveries that are made at other customer sites. And so it's not just one person plus 10 people equals a team of 11. There's this whole big bunch of stuff that goes on the back end. And as I keep having to remind people, we don't want to replace the security stuff, right? We want to take their existing investments, whether that's like their humans or the stuff they've already bought, like from a tools perspective, and make them work, operationalize everything about security. So the stuff that they've already bought, because remember, every company has access to security tools today, whether it's through the operating system, but more often than not, people are spending a lot of money on cybersecurity tools, whether it's basic AV, whether it's network stuff, whether it's managed services. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be taken care of. And we don't want to discriminate. So we don't say, hey, you can only come on board and use Symantec, McAfee, Trend, or CA or anything like that. What we've tried really, really hard to do is be as vendor agnostic as possible, because we don't want someone to be locked in to, and let's use this as a probably a poor example, but Kaspersky customers that are trying to get off of Kaspersky, if they've really bought into Kaspersky's ecosystem, it's not as simple as uninstalling an agent and deploying another one. Right? They've got everything else that was linked to that system. If they're using their EDR, if they're using their network tools, if they're using any other of the suite of capabilities that Kaspersky have. And let's remember, they were really, really good at security. So they have customers, but you can't just take it out and move it on. So that's the other benefit, I think, for some managed services. It takes you away from falling into the vendor lock-in trap. Because ultimately, right, all vendors want you to stay with them forever. And of course, Arctic Wolf's no different. But when you're selling tools and when you're trying to increase your market cap for capitalists among us, right, the thing that the investors want to see more of is retention and spend per customer. So they want to keep layering on more, not consolidating stuff away from you and trying to save you money. So in the grand scheme of things, we're not trying to replace anything. We're trying to make things work better. And that's really the conversation that really changes things when, hey, you still need a security team. We're not here to do everything for you. Like, this is a shared security model. You're going to do some stuff. We're going to do the stuff that sucks.
Makes sense. As we, I mean, there's no defined time, but as we're sort of try to wind down, I want to bring back to burnout and mental health a little bit, and say, one of the things that I had brought up prior to us starting was the idea of accrued time off versus PTO, and unlimited PTO, and the unlimited PTO. Like I said, I think it's kind of a catch-22. It's got benefits if you use it properly. If both the employee and the company use it properly, great, not a problem.
But let me ask you this: have you ever been on unlimited PTO anywhere?
Yes.
And have you ever exceeded the amount of PTO you had in your last accrual job?
Probably no. I don't think so.
And that's by design by the company. That's why they're trying to roll it out. Like you said earlier, when you accrue it, you're like, pay me. You owe me this. Like, give me the time off. Give me. And it's probably on your pay stub every couple of weeks of how many days or how many hours you've accrued. Whereas if you're having to go and say, hey, I'm just going to take time off, and how much of free PTO is too much? Like, and again, coming back to the working from home stuff, like the amount of people that I know personally that were on unlimited PTO and just didn't take any time off throughout that entire first year of COVID, because they were like, well, where am I going to go? I'm going to be at home anyway, so I might as well work.
Right. Well,
luckily, unlimited PTO isn't a thing for me as a UK employee. Like, we all, actually, I need to check that. I'm pretty sure I accrue PTO as opposed to being on unlimited PTO still. So.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, so yeah, I had said that when it was accrued, it was a lot easier to just go, well, yes, I am going to take this time because you owe me. I've earned it. It says right here. Now, minor side note, but companies oftentimes, when they, for whatever reason, are letting you go, will make arbitrary decisions about whether or not they're going to compensate you for that. And feel like they're doing, like, you've got 20 days accumulated PTO, and they're like, well, we're gonna pay you for like 5 of those, as part of your severance package. It's like, oh no, that's I already earned that money. Like, and unfortunately, at least here in the United States, they do get to decide. Like, nobody's ever pushed that. Like, the last time I had that situation personally, I did seriously consider lawyering up, because I was like, somebody needs to have this battle with the company and settle this once and for all. I'm like, if you're going to have accrued PTO and say that I've earned this time, you now owe me that time. Whether I leave of my own accord or you let me go, you still owe me this amount of money for this time.
Mm-hmm. So here's I was going to say funny story, but it wasn't funny at all. Like, when I was a former employer a number of years ago, almost a decade ago, I guess, they were transitioning their US teams onto unlimited PTO, like from accrued stuff. And, one of these weird like communications that comes out of HR that tries to explain why they're doing what they're doing, but, fails to do a good job of connecting as a human, let alone as a voice of authority. There was all this confusion because they forced the entire company to shut down for 2 weeks and to use PTO, like one time in like July, one time in September, and said, tough noogies, if you're a US employee, you have to take these dates off and the company will be shut and you have to use up any accrued PTO to do it, whether you like it or not. And there was uproar, obviously, because it was somehow scheduled right before and right after the school vacation, the summer school vacation. So people had already booked off PTO anyway. And now we're discovering that, there was this weird period that they might not be paid for the PTO for the time that they wanted to take, and they had to take the time at other times. It was just a weird shift. And it really put a sour taste in my mouth for unlimited PTO. That was the first time I'd really heard of it. It's far more common now, obviously, but that kind of tarnished my viewpoint of it right from the start. Like the company don't give a crap.
Well, I hadn't actually even considered an existing company trying to make a switch. Like most of the companies that I feel like unlimited PTO, kind of arose with, startups and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so if you're starting from scratch, that's fine. But I'd never even considered like, okay, but what if I've already accumulated 15 days and now you say, okay, well, starting Monday, we're switched to unlimited PTO. And it's like, okay, but you still owe me for my 15 days.
Yeah, some places that have transitioned actually paid it out. They had a cut over at the end of the financial year, and they're like from Monday it's going to be unlimited PTO. Anything that you had outstanding is going to be paid up. And one of the big reasons, as I understand it, like caveat emptor, like it's like the reason for the shift was not necessarily human focused. It's more about revenue or bottom line, right? Because they were carrying this debt where they owed a lot of money in hours and PTO to their employees that they couldn't have, or they didn't have any influence over, right? It was just going to sit around as a line item. I'm sure it's costing money to manage it somewhere. Whereas if they flip it over to, unlimited PTO means we don't have to worry about any of this bank balances and bookkeeping for fiscal purposes.
That makes sense. I mean, it does make sense. But and then the the other upside for the company is what we talked about, that
people don't take it.
You're reluctant to take it, kind of, because now I feel like I'm taking something from the company. Like before I earned it, it's mine. Now it's like, okay, well, everyone's trying to finish this project, but I'm going to take 3 days off. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah. It feels like you're either one extreme or the other. There are folks that are happy to take as much PTO as they can get away with. And on the other extreme, like you're just saying, it's like, it feels uncomfortable. I'm probably not going to take as much as I would. Like there doesn't seem to be much of a middle ground, right?
Right. But there are, I'm aware of a couple companies in the cybersecurity space that literally just shut down for like 2 weeks, which was like, again, going back to my days at EDS and working with General Motors, like that's a thing for the automotive industry in Detroit too. It's like, they just shut down for these 2 weeks. So there are companies that do that, and they say, okay, you know what, and then you don't have to feel bad. Now, granted, there's also the problem. There's also the problem of, it's similar to the story you just told, where it's like, okay, well, now you're dictating to me like when I need, like, what if that time doesn't line up with what I wanted to do? But at least you're being forced to disconnect for these 2 weeks. And there are companies that have very few, but there are a couple companies that I'm aware of that have a forced sabbatical. Like every few years, you've got to take off like 3 months or something.
That's pretty nice in principle, right? I mean,
there are a few companies that have started to adopt 4-day work weeks, or some did it temporarily. I know Tenable did it for a while, just as like a COVID thing. Like, hey, we're gonna have Fridays off. Yeah,
exactly. ServiceNow did a similar thing, and even I think Elastic were doing 1 or 2 days a month as like mental or well-being days or something like that. But then, for every organization, there is a subset of those people or a subset of jobs that can't just take the day off, like 24/7 SOCs, for example. We can't just shut down and give all our nice analysts a week off or a day off because cyber criminal is going to cybercrime, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because nature abhors a void. And so like my last day job, at one point, the CMO said, you know what? We've all been doing too much. I'm going to declare, Thursday is like no meeting day. So everyone just clear your calendars, no meetings. Immediately, people are scheduling meetings. They're like, well,
everyone, you got a free day. Yeah.
And it's just, and there have been a couple times where it's like, they'll a company I've been at where they've been, they'll say, well, we're for whatever reason we hit our quarterly revenue, yada yada yada, we're going to take Monday off. And then Monday, everyone's like slacking each other, doing stuff. I'm like, what don't you guys understand about a day off? Like, shut down already.
I had the same conversation with a colleague of mine just right before we got on the phone today. It's like, I'm terrible at remembering when it's UK holidays, let alone US public holidays or any other country for that matter. And so I asked a colleague of mine to shift a meeting from Friday this week because I'm busy to Monday if he had the time. And he was like, well, I'm no monarch, but in Canada, it's like Queen Victoria Day or something. And so I'd rather take every holiday I can, but let me know if you want to do this on Monday anyway. I'm like, shit, no, if it's a holiday, just turn around and say, dude, it's a holiday Monday. Can we do it on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or any other day of the week? Right?
Well, so one of the things I literally just started doing this. I read the book. What's the name of the book? Deep Work. The whole thing was about, it's just about trying to focus, and it talked about different people and like how they try to like shut everything out so they can be more productive. And I don't wholeheartedly recommend the book. I think it was one of those books where I'm like, it had some good information, but I feel like it conveyed it all in like the first 2 chapters, and then the rest of it
just fluff.
I'm like, all right, you already made the point. Like, I get it.
Give me my money back. Yeah.
But the point was still valid. So I went in. I've been going in on my iPhone and shut down like all these notifications. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I don't need the little red badge popping up to let me know that someone, that there's something on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Like, because I can't not look. Then once I see the little red badge, now I got to go look. So I shut down like all of these notifications. Like I have very few notifications enabled anymore because those are all just noise, and they're noise that like we've been conditioned, at least I've been conditioned to not ignore, so it's like, well, no, I just need the notification to not exist, because if it pops up, I'm going to go look. Yep.
It took until COVID for me to realize a similar thing, is that I don't need to have notifications on. I don't need to have Slack or Outlook on my phone over the weekend. So halfway through the pandemic, I started on a Friday when I finished work, I would delete the profile, the work profile from my phone. So no Slack messages until Monday, no Outlook until Monday. And it was a breath of fresh air. The only issue I had with it was that I ended up starting to install it earlier and earlier. So like it got to like Sunday night. I'm like, right, what time do I have to start work tomorrow? What's my first meeting? Do I need to have prepared anything? And so Sunday night, I started looking at my phone, and then Slack. And then it got to the point where I'm like, shit, it's Saturday. What have I got to prepare on Sunday before my meeting on Monday? And so this slippery slope went backwards to having, oh crap, I'm just responding to Slack messages all the time. I think what's been useful, certainly coming to a company like Arctic Wolf, is that there is a much healthier top-down drive for work-life balance here. Like the CMO makes it very clear when he is not in the office, when he's on vacation, when he's going to be out. And you know what? He doesn't say, oh, but if it's an emergency, text me. He's like, I'm out. Here's the person you need to go and talk to. I won't be online. It was a breath of fresh air when a few weeks ago, my boss sent an email to all of his direct reports saying, I'm sick. I'm not going to respond to anything today. And that was it. Like, no questions, no like, text me if it's urgent. Like, do you know what? There's bigger things to fry than, being around 24 hours for a company that probably hates you anyway.
Well, there's a thing that goes around, and it's more a commentary on how shitty the culture and healthcare are in the United States than it is on the work. But the thing that goes around every once in a while, that's like, your colleague in Europe is like, yeah, I'm taking the summer off.
Summer off, yeah. I saw it last week.
Not gonna be able to reach me. I'm not looking at my computer. I'm not answering my phone. I will see you in September. And then in America, it's like, all right, I'm having my kidney out at 10 a.m., but I'll still have my phone on me. If you need a text, I'll be available.
Yeah, exactly. I will tell you one thing that I did learn, and a shout out to my former colleague of mine at my last job, is um, making sure that I block my entire calendar day. Like if there are spaces in my calendar, people are going to book meetings, and I'll be like rolling my eyes because I'm like, I was planning to do X, Y, and Z there that is also running late. Whereas if I blocked my calendar with stuff like just time to work or time for meetings, it's very, very clear that people can't just like pick and choose time. And also it helps me plan my week as well. It's these simple things that taken me like, well, I'm 42 now. It took me like 38 years to realize, oh yeah, this is a simple way to stop people booking meetings. And that's by blocking my calendar off.
It's not that simple though. Like that there's still, I have time blocked on my calendar and people just schedule shit. And I'm
but
like,
don't you feel better about saying, sorry, I'm already booked at that time, rather than there being
actually, and I have it actually, I have it actually set to auto reject. It's just that a lot of times when I look at what it is, I'm like, all right, I have to fucking take that. Like
but at least you're choosing, because like I find that it gives me the opportunity to go back to them and say, well, number one, thanks for booking something when I've already blocked my calendar. This doesn't seem that important. Maybe we can move it, or saying, hey, let me move some stuff around. It gives you the opportunity.
It does.
It makes me feel like my default deny is more achievable because there's no big gap for someone else to fill.
Right. No, I agree with that. I'm just saying, like, on a larger scale, like even going back to the thing where my story about the CMO saying we're not going to have meetings on Thursday. It's like there just needs to be a broader culture shift of everyone else, both, actually looking at the calendar and not just making up a time and dropping it on the calendar, hoping people will show up, and B, honoring that. Like you have to actually look at my calendar and then go, oh, Tony's not available on Thursday, so I guess we'll do the meeting another time, or we'll make Tony an optional participant in this.
Yeah, there's so much of this, and this, it's funny because we will say cybersecurity is a tools problem, but I think that calendaring problems are a tools problem as well, because Outlook is terrible or Exchange is terrible at managing meetings. Like, why is there no option to automatically add a 5 or 10 minute buffer to everything that goes in my calendar? And so that's why there's this web app called Calendly, right? And so you can send people the URL and it will tell them when you're available and it will sync across multiple calendars. That's been a revelation for me as well, is because if people look at that, they can see when they can book something, they can see when I'm open, and they can see which time zone it's in as well, more importantly, because that's the other first world problem that I struggle with, is like my time zone is fluid at the best of times. And so people can't guess where I am, even though I do the best to keep my calendar up to date with and say, if there's anything open, you can book it. But then, like I said earlier, secretly, I try and block every day off anyway. So.
Right. All right. Well, I think we'll kind of end on that note, but I want to thank you for joining me. I think it was a great conversation. But yeah, I mean that we touched on a lot of other things, but the bottom line is from a mental health and mental health awareness standpoint is have some boundaries, have some work-life balance. Like your company does not own your time 24/7. They don't own your time at all. Technically, like I said earlier, they're paying you for a job, not your time. And as long as you accomplish the job, you don't need to be on 24/7.
Exactly. Like boundaries are so important. And like I said earlier, I'm the first person that screws up boundaries I try and enforce myself. So it's hard. It's very much a case of easier said than done. But trying to address burnout before it happens is the best way to address burnout, right? Not trying to figure out what to do when you've already had enough and you want to quit.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow @TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.